Hello and welcome. I am Tiberius, and today I'm continuing my interview series about getting into cybersecurity. I'm joined by Juno, a pen tester, security researcher, and member of the Cult of the Dead Cow. They're also a talented musician working on recording a folk album. Juno, welcome to my channel, and thank you for being here to share your knowledge and experiences with us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
So, what's your origin story? What first sparked your interest in cybersecurity, and how did you get into this field?
I feel like I've had a bit of a different intro than everyone else in that I was not on a computer since birth. I grew up in Alaska. We had a family computer in the living room, and sometimes the internet even worked. We had dial-up for the vast majority of my childhood just because of where we lived. And so I, for a very long time, viewed computers as sort of mysterious. But you know what I really did like doing? Puzzles, building things, and picking locks. I think at like 5, I realized I could put a hairpin in, the lock on the pantry and boom, snacks. And that really only escalated from there because I spent a lot of time running around in the woods, trying to build things, doing weird little science experiments. And I was in high school, like in 2012, and I remember seeing Anonymous in the news for the first time and thinking, whoa, what is that? I always had this very kind of strong activist streak. I grew up, going to school board meetings and advocating for, them not to cut funding to the schools and not to cut programs. I was a speech and debate kid. I'll still argue with anyone about anything, as I think people know from seeing my Twitter account. And when I went into college, I kind of had this decision of some part of me really wanted to pursue music, but I also wanted to be realistic. And so I knew that I liked math, but I didn't want to just do pure math. I didn't really want to go into engineering. So I decided may give computer science a try. Enjoyed it. I was getting good at programming. And then when I took a networking course, one of the things we could do for extra credit, and I was that kind of kid, was a CTF. And so this was the National Cyber League CTF. And I did that for the first time, and I just fell in love with it. This sense of one, I think I loved the idea of playing the criminal because I grew up reading and even writing a lot of sci-fi. I even still last year for the DEF CON short story contest wrote a very fun little heist story. And so I love that kind of thing. And then I just loved taking something apart and finding what's wrong with it. I like breaking things more than I like building things, really. And at around that time, college was not super easy for me. I definitely really started to struggle a lot academically there. And I think when I found cybersecurity, I sort of found a purpose and that a direction that I really wanted to go. Because before I was like, I'll study computer science because I think that'd be a good thing, but I didn't have this drive. And that kind of really shifted my perspective. I ended up that same year making a poster on malware analysis for the YCIS Women in Cybersecurity conference and getting my first internship because of that on a red team, which was my first actual chance to experience this kind of work in real life outside of the CTF stage. And you know what that means? That means I got in trouble for doing CTF shit on the corporate network. Not trouble is a strong word. I got told, hey, whoever's spamming SQL injection commands into this login portal, please consider that we have professional level alerting. But it was such a cool experience to learn from some really smart people in the field. And I even went to my first DEF CON that year with some friends. We slept 5 of us to a room, 2 girls in one bed, 2 guys in another, and 1 guy on 2 chairs pushed together, which I think is the quintessential college DEF CON experience. And
Yeah, I think so.
going to DEF CON, I was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to be a part of, because this was the year that this was DEF CON 27. It was still stretched across several casinos, and I had barely been out of Alaska. Las Vegas was like something out of a video game. It was like there's neon lights everywhere. People are hacking cars. That's where I learned to start picking locks properly. And Actually, this DEF CON, I ran into somebody from that internship who I'd lost contact with afterwards. And it was so cool to see her again and kind of see that like my involvement in that community really started all the way back then. And I eventually graduated college and I got a job through the same company that I had the internship with, but they didn't have any like red team or pen testing roles open. And so I was put on a different team. And I ended up like kind of after I had all this like passion about this one thing, and then I wasn't in a technical role at all. I was in access management more on the policy side. And if I'm being honest, I was very bad at it. I think coming in as somebody brand new, not just to the company and the role, but as someone brand new to professional security, I did not have a lot of good ideas about what policy should look like. And I definitely I learned a lot in that role, but there was always the sense of, can I get out of here? And so I really wanted, I still had this goal of being a pen tester or a red teamer, and I didn't want to just kind of let this stop or deter my journey down a different path. And one of the things that I discovered when I first moved to Dallas, Texas for that job was the Dallas Hackers Association. And this was my first time re entering a hacking space. This was now 2, 3 years after my first DEF CON. And I remember I walked in and up on the stage, somebody's disassembling a binary and they're wearing like a furry tail clipped to their pants. And I was like, yes, I found the weird people. Because I moved to Dallas for this job without really knowing anyone there. And so sitting on at that first Dallas Hackers Association, I was like, okay, I know two things. One, these are my people. And two, I really, really want to be an active member of this community. And one thing that the Dallas Hackers Association has been incredible about is its support of newcomers. My very first time in attendance, a guy got up and talked about his Python program that he wrote to convert between ASCII, hex, and binary, and everybody applauded. It wasn't a like, you have to be this level of lead hacker to talk. So I knew that I wanted to talk. I've had this background in public speaking. While I'm very, very shy in a room full of people, you give me a soapbox and the spirit of an extrovert takes over for a little bit. And I didn't know exactly what to talk about though, because I had all of my most of my pen testing red teaming experience had come from an internship that I couldn't really talk about. I also, there was this conflict of interest with my job because I was working for a major corporation. They were like, we don't really want people speaking under their real name. And kind of the agreement that I came to, which I found out a couple years later was maybe not an agreement they were supposed to be making with people, was, but if I didn't talk about anything that I was doing and I didn't use my real name, it was fine. And so that's kind of where Juno was born. I agonized over that handle. People say like, "Oh, it's not a hacker handle unless someone else gives it to you." I gave that one to myself.
That's wild. I've never heard that. That's crazy.
I think being bestowed with a hacker handle is a really cool thing, but I think this is a total side tangent, so forgive me, but I have a whole theory about this. I think a lot of us want the opportunity in life to choose our own names, and maybe I kind of feel that way because like I ended up coming out as non-binary later, and so I have this weird connection with identity, but I've noticed there are a lot of hackers in the space who use their real name are using a nickname and kind of a variation that they or their family chose for them. And, a lot of people, I think it's a great opportunity to create a new identity. Because for a while, like, Juno got to be this, like, personality that I would put on to public speak and stuff. And I don't know, I just love a good secret identity. And I think a lot of people want the opportunity to name themselves. That was a ramble. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's 100% reasonable. I've never heard of like a demand that you had to be named by somebody else. That's kind of weird. Because what if you don't like the name that someone comes up with? Like, that's crazy. Like, I don't know.
I accidentally named someone something they didn't like and they changed it. And that was great. And I felt really, really bad because I had thought that this was something they wanted as their name and they were kind of just waiting for someone to call them. And they were like, I hate this so much. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Please, I'll never call you this again. It wasn't anything like derogatory. It was just not a name that they vibed with.
I can't imagine like not being able to choose your. I can't imagine also like just gatekeeping hacker names like that. That's kind of weird. I'm not. I've ranted so much about gatekeeping in this industry, but that's just another thing that I'm like, what? No,
So to
that's
say,
not. It's like that advert, like the commercial on TV. That's not how any of this works.
yeah,
I chose Tiberius, and people like question, okay, what like? Is it like a James Tiberius Kirk reference? Is it just Roman Emperor stuff? And I'm like, I just really liked the name Tiberius. That's really literally it's the most boring like story, but I just liked how the name Tiberius sounded, and then I kind of after the fact lent into the Roman thing because it kind of made more sense, right? Also, I'm a Picard guy, not a Kirk guy, but yeah, so
the correct opinion.
right. So yeah, it was people should be able to choose their hacker names, or they should be able to choose to not go with the hacker name. It's fine. It's a valid choice, I feel. I do get depressed slightly when I see like cons and the talks and most people don't have a hacker name. Because I just
I
feel like
know.
I love it when people have their hacker. And it's okay if you have like your real name and then your hacker handle in parentheses or vice versa. I like that. But I don't know. And it's fine. I'm not going to judge anyone. I just feel like, oh, that's a shame, you know?
Yeah,
People don't have a hacker handle or they don't feel comfortable using a hacker handle. It's like this industry is so much fun that I feel like, it's a chance to express yourself. So yeah.
yeah. It's weird. Sometimes I'll sign up for events and they'll be like, "Oh, can we see your ID?" And I'm like, "Do you think it says Juno Last Namington on my government ID?" They made a rule about black hat because of me, or I think they
Oh, yeah.
did. I one year they did the free like badges to get in the vendor area, and I signed up with Juno Last Namington or something similar. And I go to pick up my badge, like, "Can I see your ID?" And I'm like, "I mean, you can." And so they eventually did let me in because I was like, "Here's the website." I didn't know that I
Yeah.
needed my ID. And the next year when I went to sign up in big block letters, you need to have your legal name on your ID, which
Yeah.
that's black hat for you.
I don't know if Microsoft were the same thing, but I got an invite to the Microsoft party, the security research group party last year at Black Hat. And the person who invited me was like, "Can I have your real name for the thing?" And I'm like, "Can I just go with Tiberius?" And I'm like, "I'll ask." And then like when I showed up to the event, they asked my real name to find the badge. And I gave it to them and they were like, "You're not here." And I was like, "Is Tiberius there just out of interest?" With a 3? And they were like, "Oh yeah, here it is." So, but then this year it was like, yeah, they had a sign up sheet and I had to use my real name. So I just stuck stickers over my real name on the badge. So I
Me
was
too.
like, "No, you're not knowing my real name. Sorry."
I completely sidetracked this. But so I gave my first talk. I decided to do it on game theory and behavioral economics because that was something I studied in undergrad that I was really passionate about. And I thought it would be a fun thing to apply to cybersecurity and also a way to like be interesting without talk about something people didn't already know about. And so my very first talk, I had people act out the prisoner's dilemma at Dallas Hackers Association. And then, we went into their decisions and whether they were rational or not. And I learned a lot, I think, from that one, just in that nobody at Dallas Hackers Association is going to betray each other, even in a simulated environment, which I love. And that kind of went on to inform some of my other talks in kind of talking about like, is how economics defines rationality even correct? And, how can we make these models more realistic, include some of these external values that are harder to calculate, like, community and peer pressure and whatnot. And spite. I did one on spite. I did that talk. It was really well received, and people were like, "Oh, you should apply to B-Sides Austin." And I ended up going on to do B-Sides Austin, Houston, and Chicago with kind of different game theory, behavioral economics talks. B-Sides Austin was my first real large talk. I remember driving from Dallas to Austin on the phone with my mom, crying because everything was going to go wrong and everybody would hate me and they would laugh me out of hacking and the entire state of Texas. Clearly. Very rational, dramatic person. I think Phil Wiley had to more or less drag me out of the green room for my talk. And I got up there and you know what happened? Everything went wrong. The projector wouldn't work.
Oh god.
And somebody started heckling me because of it. And I was doing all of this math. I had this math and these graphs, and I was like standing up there, verge of tears, and the one guy's like, "So are you going to talk or not?" And I just remembered college, and my professor did all this with a whiteboard, and there was a whiteboard behind me. So I decided to do it the old-fashioned way, and when I got to the audience participation part, I called for volunteers. I pointed at that guy, I said, "You seem like you have a lot to say. Do you want to come up here?" And no, he did not.
Of course not.
And since then, I've really never had any stage fright because I already got through like the worst possible thing. I was so like nervous, my hands were shaking afterwards. I sat down at the lockpick village and I won the lockpick competition, I think just by like fuzzing all of the locks with my nervous energy. I haven't won one since.
That's awesome. That's great. Basically rakes the lock open by accident.
Yeah, there's like picks and And then from there, I ended up taking leadership of DC214, Dallas's DEF CON group, which I ran for about 6 years until I moved here. And during that time, I did get my first pen test job too through that local Dallas community. There was a small consultancy in Texas that was hiring new pen testers, and I interviewed. I didn't feel like the interview went well, and in fact, more than a year later, my manager at the time told me, "Yeah, you don't interview well." And at that point, though, I was like, "Well, you hired me, so whose problem is it really?" But that was my first like real pen testing job on a consultant red team, so I got to do a lot of, I mean, web apps were the bread and butter, but I also ended up kind of running our phishing program near the end there, and yeah, truly became the information security professional that I wanted to be. I guess, yeah, that's how I got into it. Sorry, I went on such a long journey to answer the question.
No, it's great. It's an awesome story. So I love how all the bits and pieces that sort of make up like how you got into the industry ultimately. It's very cool. So industrial control systems, there is no segue for this. Industrial control systems is one of your interests. And I saw you were involved slightly with the ICS Village this year at DEF CON. So what drew you to ICS security in the first place, and why is it so important?
I was always interested in IoT devices and ICS security, in part because of the talks I was giving about game theory. One of the directions I was looking into was uses of game theory in ad hoc networking for like cars or devices that are kind of moving and creating these mesh networks. And then I was fortunate enough to, as a part of my master's program, take a course on ICS security through NYU, where we got into not just like a lot of the security vulnerabilities inherent in these systems, but how some of these like cyber physical attacks would actually work. The professor who taught this course had a huge background in building water treatment facilities. So we went through a lot of the math behind, okay, you have access to the PLCs. How many pipes would you need to open in order to create like a true water hammer and stuff like that? So there was a lot more physics involved than I expected, but it was incredibly cool. And ICS security is so important for several reasons. The first of which is just the extreme importance of these cyber physical systems. You know, let's look at the news headlines in the past few years. We had the city of Lubbock's water treatment facility was compromised, and threat actors were actually posting videos like showing them using the HMI, human machine interface controls or flipping through the controls and changing things. It later showed that they like tried to open things, but some of the errors they caused wouldn't let them. So there wasn't a real physical impact in that one. Because one thing we see is that these systems aren't as secure as they should be. And there's several reasons for that. A lot of the devices that go into actually controlling these systems they have to have a much longer life cycle than you would expect from any other internet connected device, because they're usually extremely specific and extremely difficult to replace. A lot of the like base level controls are almost impossible to update. And so oftentimes, if you can get into the network with these controls, you're in. There are several known vulnerabilities that can't be updated. And then I think another big issue is like, I feel everybody's talking about, oh, what's going to be the next Stuxnet? Like, should we air gap our systems? And it's like, stop worrying about air gapping and, actually segment your network first. I think you see a lot of these like incredibly flat networks, and you see some of these things online or accessible from places that they shouldn't be. And we'll find that even without cyber attacks, these systems can be incredibly fragile and incredibly slow to fix. I mean, look at how long the fixes in Flint, Michigan have taken, for example, which that obviously
Yeah.
wasn't a cyber attack, but these attacks can cause billions of dollars in damages in just the time it takes to fix things.
So, for someone who's intrigued, let's say someone new who's intrigued by ICS, but without access to industrial gear, like what's a realistic path to build a skill set?
That's definitely a place that I'm in right now, too. I think there's a couple of different ways you can go. I think learning about the industrial control systems and how they work, how they're supposed to work, is really, really useful and kind of underrated. Go look up, there are employee guides out there for, hey, it's your first day at this water treatment facility. Here's how everything works. And then I think also starting to mess with the hardware side of things, like go to Walmart, go pick up the shittiest looking little IoT device. I recommend some of those little $5 like Wi-Fi controlled door locks. Don't put it on your door, but take it apart. There are so many great hardware hacking guides out there. One thing I like to do is go find a video on YouTube of someone who's hacked something and go buy the same device and follow along. And often you're not gonna see the exact same vulnerabilities. I also think then learning like how to move through networks, particularly Windows networks, because a lot of the major ICS attacks that have happened, they haven't happened due to these, or like initial access wasn't due to hyper specialized vulnerabilities in the PLCs, for example. It was more through an employee was phished, and once the attacker gained access to the network, they were able to use those same credentials to log into one of the HMI controllers, and from there, they could control everything. And so many of these attacks come from just like really basic network hygiene. And so learning how to attack and move through networks and identify weird things is really important. I've been on the flip side where I've done a pen test for a water provider in the state of Texas, and that one was one they did not want us touching any of their ICS network, which makes sense. It's very fragile. And so we kind of had to learn how to quickly identify anything that might be that in order to stay away from it, because in many of these spaces, they can't always tell you exactly what's online. And so for anyone out here who's listening, who's managing something like this, one, good luck. And two, definitely asset management and all of these like really boring things are actually very important.
For sure.
One thing that's I will say has been really cool about a lot of the recent attacks on critical infrastructure is often the employees there notice before any real damage can be done. And that's because so much can go wrong in these systems that there's so much alerting and like actual sirens just because of the fear that somebody will make a mistake. And often attackers, when they get access to these controls, they don't really know what they're doing. They know they want to cause damage, but it's hard to figure out how. And it's very easy to do something that will set off these alarms. And so many of the case studies that I looked at, it was employees who were, just monitoring for changes noticed, like, hey, the amount of lye in the water is increasing. That's not good. We need to shut it down. Then they discovered that it was due to a cyber attack, not an error or another issue. So, yeah, thank you to all of the on-the-ground employees for saving us many times.
Yeah, I feel like that's a thankless job as well a lot of the times. So, yeah, I mean, it's good that happens. At the same time, you do worry as soon as the attackers get more competent, like they can, I guess, potentially increase the levels of whatever very slowly or something. And, at that point, what point do you notice?
Yeah, and that's... Maybe I shouldn't have given the advice away about the employee handbooks that you can find online. That is always the challenge.
I'm sure they're all aware.
That's true. It is always the challenge in this space is, oh, I found something cool. How do I reveal it in a way that will make things more secure instead of less secure? But that's its own topic.
Yeah, it's always the debate about responsible disclosure. So, like, I'm always on the side of it's better that everybody knows than,
Definitely.
a few people and ultimately leaking out to the attackers at some point anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, somebody else will always find it eventually.
So, one of the things that we have in common is we both went to, or you currently go to, grad school for cybersecurity. You studied at NYU in 2021, which is roughly 10 years after I graduated with my master's. Now, back then, a master's was seen as a significant help when it came to getting into the industry. Do you feel like it has the same benefits today?
I think it has benefits, but maybe not the same ones. I sort of when I had this grand idea to go back to grad school during the pandemic when I think I was a little lonely and bored and I wanted this like return to the familiar. And I think I mentioned earlier that I really struggled in undergrad. And I think I really wanted to redeem that a little bit now that I felt like I had a place and I knew a little bit more of what I was doing. And I don't know if those are, in hindsight, I don't know if those are great reasons to go to grad school, but fortunately, I am very stubborn. This degree may take me 10 years, but I'm going to finish it. I, that was one thing that sort of plagued me throughout the beginning is I applied for grad school in the hopes that it would help me get a pen testing job because that was my big goal. And then I got a pen testing job before my first set of classes even started. And one thing, kind of once I was in the consultant pen testing space, is certifications are, one very important way to show your skill. And I don't have any. And so I think a lot of the times professionally, people have been like, hey, can you maybe get a certification? I'm like, I can't add anything to this like Jenga tower I have of grad school and work and running hackers associations. I think I was very fortunate to find a program that offered a fellowship program that came with a 75% scholarship. And that was a huge motivator for me because I'll be able to finish grad school without going into debt. I think for anyone considering grad school, there are definitely programs out there that will pay for you to do it or pay for you to do most of it. Don't go into debt for it. And I think the program I'm doing, there were some really cool things where it was designed for adults who are working as opposed to people going full academia. So for the most part, many classes were at night or on weekends, which allowed for a little bit more flexibility. I think as far as the classes I've taken, there were a few that I learned a lot. I mentioned the ICS security course. I also took a pen testing course where the professors had set up CTFs for every assignment. And I took a very cool binary exploitation reverse engineering course that, gosh, it was so hard. I think I cried every single time I submitted an assignment, but I learned so much more than I have anywhere else. That being said, I'm also taking a lot of like discrete math and other courses that I'm like, why am I doing this? A cert would help me in my career so much. And I started grad school at the same time, kind of people were saying, oh, the CISSP is basically the same as a grad degree. And I had so many people ask me, like, why are you going to grad school instead of getting your CISSP? And one, I hadn't been in security long enough. Two, I don't want to do that because I go to cons for fun, not for continuing education points. And don't get me wrong, this is no shade to people who have these certifications. There are so many different paths to get into cybersecurity. And coming in from a like bachelor's degree and grad school, like that is a huge place of privilege. Like, I was very fortunate that I was able to go to college and I'm able to do this master's program without incurring debt. And so I don't want it to seem like my path was the only one because I feel very lucky to have been able to take this path as much as I complain about grad school. And yeah, it's kind of interesting what being like slogging through the final courses in my degree and having people every once in a while be like, wait, but do you have any certs? And I think kind of the lack of trust in academia space and some like, especially some of the online grad programs comes from some of these programs themselves. There are a lot of kind of, I don't want to say degree farms, but there.
No, you can say degree farms. There are definitely.
And I feel like that type of place, the people they end up hurting the most are the students because I think a lot of students, they don't go into one of these programs thinking, yeah, haha, I've found a secret shortcut to get a degree without actually putting in any effort. I think a lot of people go into these because they want to learn. They've found a reasonable and hopefully affordable graduate program. And then, they come out not having learning stuff and having a degree that no one will respect. And that's not fair. And it's not just certain grad programs doing that. There are a lot of amazing certifications and boot camps. There are also a lot of them that, yeah, they aren't doing right by their students. And so I think it's important as this industry grows for there still to be a emphasis on taking people from all backgrounds. Because as an industry sort of industries or becomes more of an industry than a weird little niche, there's a lot more. I feel like there's a lot more requirements for people to wade through, and I don't think that's fair. I really hope that once I get this master's degree, it will be extremely helpful. I worry that, like, right now, as I am currently looking for a job, it might be a deterrent, and that I'm sitting on these interviews and explaining, yes, I'm also a master's student. I will also be taking classes as I start on at your company. And nobody said that's a hindrance. I think that's my own fear that people will think, oh, maybe she's not serious if she's taking classes at the same time. Or like, oh, maybe like being a pen tester is just a stepping stone and their like ultimate goal to be CTO or whatever. And my goal has always been to stay in hacking. This is something that I hope will be another stepping stone to get there. And I hope it really proves to people that I am interested and am passionate and am willing to keep learning. Because I think no matter how you do it, continuing to learn is the most important.
It's also fine to have ambitions. Like you kind of want employees to have ambitions. You like that the whole kind of the point of employing somebody is guiding their career, and maybe they remain in pen testing and just become more of a senior principal level pen tester. Maybe they want to go and lead a team, getting more into management. I think that's fine. So, but just going back to what you said about the industry as a whole needing to like look at the broader range of people. I think a lot of people forget that this industry started from people who didn't have any professional experience in security. It was a bunch of hackers, right? Just playing with stuff in their own time. And the kind of industry sort of spawned from that, which is a good thing. But yeah, they didn't have a degree. There were no degrees. Like the master's I did 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now, was one of the first, I think, in the UK to do just cybersecurity as a dedicated master's. So yeah, it's not relatively new, but it was back then, and that's where the industry came from. So yeah.
You know what I do consider like a really unsettling sign of the times, and who knows, this may have changed by the time this episode comes out, but the master's program I'm doing, they're actually shutting this fellowship down. Pretty soon they're taking like the last kind of cohorts. And I will say, I think NYU's program, it is a real program. It's one of those things that you get in what you've put out, but I think it's really done a lot to get people into this industry. And it's really sad to see something that, as much as I complain about it, has been such a benefit to me, starting to go away for people in the future. Because you always want the benefits that you've had in life to then everybody should get to do those things. And I don't know, I find it worrying to see these good programs start to shut down, I assume because they're not super profitable. And I hope we don't see more of that in the future.
Yeah, I hope not either. It does suck. It probably is profit. That's the problem. I imagine it's more that there are now more undergraduate cybersecurity degrees, maybe.
That could be.
That's obviously a boost. Like it's like back when I went to college, university, there were no cybersecurity degrees at an undergraduate level. I basically did computer science, and that was kind of obvious, right? So yeah, maybe it's just a shift. I hope that's the reason. But at the same time, I feel like computer science, if you're going to do degrees like cybersecurity, like I know it's like almost like a cliche at this point. It's not an entry level field. Like you do kind of need some kind of background, at least in tech, like some knowledge, right? If you just go straight into cybersecurity, you'd be like, what the heck support? So yeah, it's an interesting one. But I hope there are more opportunities, at least for newcomers in that area.
Me too. Because I got so fortunate in my career from people who just extended opportunities to someone new. Or people will be like, you don't know anything, but I can tell you care, so we're going to give you a shot. That's how I got anywhere in life. And I just want everyone to have those same opportunities.
Agreed. So another one of your interests is phishing, specifically the ethics of phishing campaigns. And a few years ago, the Chicago Tribune sent out fake bonus emails as part of a phishing simulation, which many saw as tone deaf. In your view, what makes a phishing test cross the line ethically?
There's a couple of things. I think anything that would affect someone's life, whether that's bonuses, firing, and because I've seen people do I accidentally sent this out, so therefore people who clicked on this document, well, they were morally in the wrong because they wanted to read the secret document about who was getting fired. No, we would all click on that document. And I think that's a lot of what the ethics really comes down to is at some point, everybody clicks. And so I think for me, I care less about who clicked on the email and more about, the overall percentage of the receivers who clicked on the email, and then how did my malware detonate in your environment? That's what I really care about. I definitely, when I was at this Texas consultant company, I kind of became the de facto person in charge of the phishing program. You know how it is, how a couple people leave and you're like, oh no, I'm the expert now. And so one of the big fights that I would pick every single time is I hated sending clients the list of users that clicked on the link in my phishing email because I already felt like that was irrelevant. It shouldn't be about punishing these individual users. It should be more about training the company as a whole. What I always liked to do when I was doing that was I would build a highly specialized payload, and then I wanted somebody on their security team to open my email, click all the links, download everything, and run it. And I wanted to see if it ran, if I was able to get my shell, or if it was blocked, and what they caught it and how they caught it, because I think that matters so much more than whether users clicked. And as far as the payloads I used, I tried to couple of the options would change depending on the client, but I often tried to base it off of real phishing emails. I'd, try to include some of the typos, some of the things that you would actually see in a real phishing email, because I did want people to see it and report it. And I think it's better to be realistic than be like, ha ha ha, I'm getting one by these folks. Now, that being said, one of the things that I felt a little bit differently about was targeted phishing of executives, because that's something that happens in real life. And so you need to test that. And that is something where you have to get a little bit closer to a person. But I always try to stick to either semi-business related emails, or if I had a target who I knew really liked knitting, I might send a knitting newsletter with a PDF for a cool new pattern or something. And in those cases, it was often somebody who had consented to a targeted phishing assessment of them. And so that was a little bit different than just sending things to your average employee. I always wanted to stick with things that people wouldn't be disappointed if they weren't real, or people wouldn't be scared for their life or their job. I've seen people do during COVID, fake COVID outbreak notification emails, and that was something I wouldn't touch, because that creates such a adversarial relationship between employees and the cybersecurity teams. And it's so much better for people to have a relationship with their security teams where they can go, hey, I clicked on this and then it did something weird and now I'm really worried. I had a couple jobs ago, one of the managers sent everybody a Amazon gift card as a little Christmas bonus thing. I kept reporting that to cybersecurity, and he had to come over to go, no, I promise this is real.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing. So I swear, if the IT teams who are organizing these phishing campaigns looked at the number of links that are just sent by them or managers or the CEO or even HR, right? I swear, every like October, there's an email that goes out that says, "Hey, you need to sign up for your new benefits package. Here's the link. Click it, sign in." Blah blah blah. Like it's kind of insane. Why
Yeah.
are we? Why are we suddenly like, okay, it's okay if it comes from HR, but if it comes from somebody else, like people are going to click on it. And to your point, I feel like it just raises so many good questions. If our security is so bad that clicking a single link, just clicking a link, results in some kind of compromise, that I think is indicative that we have way worse problems with
Yeah.
the state of security at the company.
I always like to do kind of a tiered approach in my phishing campaigns. Like, I think one of my favorite premises to use was, hello, we're a third party security contractor and we need you to install this like network monitoring software on your machine. And so the first email would, so I designed this payload when macros started being turned off by default instead of on. So I had to change everything in the middle of an assessment to try to get around that. And so the email was like, this will take you to our site where you can download things. And I would spoof every company's like login if I could find it and have a fake so they click the link, it takes them to a fake login page. I get username and password that way. And then there are three downloads, or there are two downloads. The first one was a Word document that was my original payload, but then I took all the macros out, so it was actually just a red herring, and it would explain how to install the software and like, oh yeah, you need to disable this, because I was interested to see how many people would follow these steps. And what I found as I went through is there's like a sweet spot where if it's too few steps, people don't want to just click and download something because that's sketchy. But if it's too many steps, then they're just not going to do it. And often I'd have multiple payloads for them to run in this like sequence because I wanted to see what would execute in their environment. But I always, with every client, I really advocated for kind of more of an assumed breach approach. Like, even if you wanted me to send the phishing email out to ex-employees and report like, yeah, 30% of your company clicked on this, or like, hey, only 1% did. Yeah, I wanted someone on their team to run everything in their environment, because that also meant when I was building payloads, I could tailor them. I could do like multiple iterations and test them, because to me, that's way more important. One thing I was really surprised by in that space is, when I was getting into pen testing and red teaming, I'd hear all of these stories about social engineering and think, oh, that's the coolest thing in the world. I would love to do that. And I did get to do a couple of physicals in that time. And what I didn't expect was to feel really, really bad the whole time. One of the
Yes.
ones I'd done, we'd looked at the layout of this building and I knew that their server room that I needed to get into was right next to their bathroom. I was there with my boss, who was a man. And so I go up to the receptionist and I'm like, hey, this is really embarrassing, but you have a tampon. And she goes upstairs to look for one. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know what? This crossed a moral line for me. Like, I'm going straight to hell. I have violated the girl code so egregiously. And that target, actually, we didn't get in because they were very used to physical pen testers coming through. And apparently, when we walked in, I pointed directly to the server room and they're like, how would somebody who hasn't been here know where that is? So we did a retrospective with them afterwards. But that was one that I was so glad that she didn't fall for it. Because I apologized kind of afterwards, because I really felt like I'd crossed one of my own moral lines. And in other of those, in the same series of physicals I was doing, there was one where, instead of social engineering my way in, I found a desk sitting in the hallway that was being moved from office to office that had all the receptionist information, including a nice warning that physical pen testers would come by and signs to look for, and where the visitor badges were stored, people would need to have with their visitor's badge. And so that one, I took a visitor's badge and a set of keys out of the desk, and I walked around letting myself in every place. And that was way more fun. I think I really, really like winning against a system as opposed to a person, because everybody can be tricked. I know I can be tricked. And it's better to see if you have systems in place to prevent people being tricked or deal with things afterwards. Because you want people to trust the
Yeah.
security teams, and not that like, oh, you click on a link, you might get fired. Because you don't want people to hide when they have made a mistake. Because I think everybody will at some point.
Yeah. And I totally get the point about social engineering. I'm fairly certain I'd be pretty good at social engineering. I did play for a while back in the pandemic, a lot of Among Us.
Me too.
And I've done like social engineering engagements before. So I know I can do them. But I think there's that distinction. Like it's not just you have to be good at sort of lying, right? Being deceptive. Because being deceptive when you're among friends and everyone understands that's what people are doing, that's easy. But then when it becomes like real and you're actually lying to someone in real life, even though you know morally you're fine, because obviously that's the whole point of the engagement, right? You're being paid to lie, and ultimately nobody should be getting in trouble afterwards either. It still feels bad. And there's a distinction, because when you're phishing, you're doing the same thing. You're lying to people, but there's a computer between you and them. There's a whole network between you and them, and you don't see them. When you're standing in front of somebody and just lying to their face, it's really difficult. Or even when you have them on the phone, it's really difficult. And so I'm always impressed by people who can socially engineer, because it's tough. It's tricky. Like, I just keep feeling bad afterwards. But yeah, I understand. It is a necessity, and I'm glad there are people who can do it, but damn, does it make me feel bad.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to feel bad because I love lying. Are you kidding? Like, yeah, I loved playing Among Us during the pandemic. I definitely, if I'm hanging out at a bar, I will absolutely make up a fictional character and a backstory to introduce myself as, because I don't know, it's fun. But yeah, once you're like, oh, somebody's job could be on the line because of what I'm saying, or just this. Yeah, I think it's very important that if you do have to lie to people in these scenarios, that you make it as ethical as possible. And I've had talked to people who have told me, I don't think there's anything, or there is no such thing as an ethical phishing assessment. And I don't know if I agree with that, though I can certainly see where they're coming from. Because I think, yeah, you do need to know if most of your company is clicking on something that's very clearly a phishing email. The company needs to know that. They need to figure out how to make security more of a priority and how to give people the tools they need to not fall for some of these scams and stuff. So it's very important work. But yeah, I never want to get someone in trouble for being nice or using their best instincts, because that's something I've realized just as you go through life. I think real life hardens you so much already to mistrust people. And I don't want to add to that. We're all getting too cynical too fast anyways. I don't want to kind of push that on people, because like with the woman I asked for a tampon from, I was like, what if she never trusts another girl again? What if she thinks about this like anytime she's, in a bar bathroom and someone's asking her for something, like, and I know I was overthinking it in that moment, but I was just like, okay, if I do this again, I have to find a way to be more true to my own ethics. And I think, like, even in kind of a consultant situation where there were times the client would be like, no, I want the list of people, and I would have to provide it to them, you can still stay as true as possible to your own ethics, I think. And I think that's always really important.
Yeah. I know several companies that I've worked for have refused to give that. They've just given stats, which I think is fair. Like, ultimately, it shouldn't matter who the people are. It should matter just the numbers. Like, we sent out 150 phishing emails and 20 people clicked on them. That's useful information. You don't need to know who it is.
Exactly.
Like, realistically. So I feel like that's probably fine. But yeah. So let's talk about community. You've been very active in hacker communities like DC214 when you lived in Dallas. And I often see you at cybersecurity cons as well. How important has community been in your cybersecurity career?
I might not even be in security without this community. I think it's so incredibly important because, I attended my first DEF CON as next DEF CON will be my 10-year anniversary. I was, a 20-year-old who had barely left Alaska, and I walked into this crazy space with people doing these cool things, and my first thought wasn't, oh boy, I hope I get a job in this. Though I was thinking that. It was, oh my God, I want to be friends with everybody here. I want to know these people and I want them to teach me everything they can. And I think that was what really motivated me to go into cybersecurity. I mean, I'm not going to say that like, oh, I never thought about money or having a job with good health benefits. Obviously, I did. I think that's something we're all very concerned about right now. But it was walking into these spaces and being like, oh my gosh, I want to be here. I want to be a part of this. And all of the opportunities that I've had have kind of come from these spaces, whether it was my first internship. I'd attended a conference and I'd done just a little poster on like different ways you can analyze malware using like really simple tools. I think that was where my true love of the tool strings came from, which I still stand by as one of the most important reversing tools out there.
It is very useful.
But then I think, yeah, coming to Dallas, not knowing anybody and working this job that wasn't what I wanted to do, I was really questioning all the life decisions that had led me to this place and finding Dallas Hackers Association and going, oh my God, the strange people are here finally. And it was through them I was encouraged to start going to conferences and speaking. And I even got, my first pen testing job. Somebody in the local Dallas community reached out and said, hey, I work here. We're hiring. Please come apply. And then my most recent role was they'd reached out over Twitter and said, hey, do you want to be on our live stream at DEF CON? And afterwards, I was like, hey, y'all hiring? And I also think outside of just the professional, this is how you network and meet people. So many of my real friends have come from these spaces. Like one of my absolute best friends, I'm going to be a bridesmaid in her wedding next month. I met her at B-Sides DFW. And I think for a lot of us, especially people moving around for work and stuff, finding friends with kind of the same weird niche interests feels really, really difficult. And so, yeah, having friends that like I go with to DEF CON every year is so cool, especially in comparison to my first DEF CON where I didn't know anybody at all. And I also think community is a great place to kind of give back. Because I feel like in many ways, I've been incredibly lucky in my career. I've had a lot of people take chances on me. And if somebody lowered a ladder for me, I want to drop a set of stairs if I can. And I think one great thing from my time running DC214 is I was able to help encourage people to give presentations and offer them a like safe, judgment-free platform to do that. One thing that I loved every single month is we would get more women. Because when I took over leadership, it was often I was the only like female presenting person in the room. And I was often like by far the youngest too. And in my time there, just watching more and more women and non-binary folks and queer folks show up and then stay because, they saw leaders who were similar to them. And, I will say, like, this wasn't just me. When I joined Dallas Hackers Association, I went with a friend from my first job, and she now runs DC214, actually, since I've moved. And it was something like often we were the only two women in the room. But then when there were other women in the room, they would gravitate to us. And I feel weird kind of bouncing back and forth being like, I'm non-binary, but also like I have the women in cybersecurity experience. So I'm going to, I don't know, keep doing it though, because it's a weird position to be in, but I think it's relatively accurate. And that group has grown just so much beyond, or since I left, I went back actually on my birthday of this year. I flew back in, I went to DC214 and it was packed. There were more like female presenting people than I had ever seen before. And it was like, this is going to last forever past me. And that's all you can ask for. And I have clearly a bit of a history with joining groups that have a storied history that's far beyond me, because DC214 is one of the oldest groups in the Texas area. They're, I want to say 22 or 23 now. I know we celebrated the 21st anniversary with a very cool party that my band got to play at. And then I also, in 2021, joined the Cult of the Dead Cow, which has been around since 1984. And I truly believe that both of these groups will last long beyond me. And being a part of the CDC has been very cool because I've gotten to be at least tangentially a part of some incredibly cool projects. One of which I'm about to rant about a little bit right now. Some folks from the Cult of the Dead Cow have been working on a project called Valid. And unlike some previous CDC releases like Back Orifice and BO2K, this is not something malicious. This is actually a tool that we want everyone to be able to use eventually. The quick elevator pitch is that Valid is a application framework that uses distributed networking in an attempt to prevent network-based tracking. And basically the idea is, and I have not been one of the engineers on this project, I'm really just somebody who gets to be in the room. So like a lot of the technical credit for this project should really go to Dildog, TC Johnson, and Gibson. And I'm sure there's also a bunch of other people who I'm leaving out. I'm sorry. But the idea is basically to build a variation on the internet that will not allow any tracking and to give people, complete privacy and freedom over what they see or what they see online. And with some of the bills that we see coming in, like the egregious, what was it? Green Act, something. I just remember it was protecting the children's retinas was in the horribly placed backronym for that. People deserve to access things without showing their legal government name. I think this will ultimately be really helpful if any of those rules come into effect. One of my current side projects is I'm attempting to back up Archive of Our Own, the fan fiction website, onto Valid. I'll call it Archive of Our Own. So keep an eye out for this is how this is how I plan to save the world. But really, yeah, people should be able to go to whatever sites they want on the internet without government interference, and people should be able to use the internet without being tracked and having their data sold to data brokers. And those are two things that I really hope Valid will solve. But to anyone listening, you know what Valid needs? We need you. The framework is built. There are great guides online for setting up a node. This is the next step is having the community build what they want to see on this framework. Like we've got a few cool projects in the works, but I expect and truly hope them to just be blown out of the water by whatever y'all create.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll put some links in the episode description for that. And you actually kind of jumped ahead in my questions because I did. My next question was about Cult of the Dead Cow. So can you actually share your story of how you got involved with CDC and became a member?
Yeah, it was, it's sort of like The Godfather. Just, I woke up in bed one day and there was the head of a cow. No, I'm kidding. I'm still in this place where I'm like, how were these really cool, smart people drawn to me? I think it was a combination of things. Like around that time, I was very active on social media and especially talking about politics and things. I've backed off a little bit just as Twitter has gone the way that it's gone, but I'm still there. I'm still on Blue Sky. I'm still making an effort. But I was introduced to several of the CDC members without really knowing who they all were at DEF CON. I want to say this was 29. This was the 2021 kind of post-pandemic one.
So that was my first DEF CON.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. The COVID con. It was like 10,000 people at the Paris and Bally's, right?
I kind of loved that because
it was good.
I missed the chaos of careening through casinos. I'm not going to lie. And yeah, I feel like that year I truly got to know everyone. And that year I was giving 2 village talks, one at the IoT Village on using game theory for ad hoc networking, and one at the Adversary Village just on using game theory in adversarial tactics. And so that year the talks were done hybrid where I pre-recorded, and then for the IoT Village I was also going to give the talk in the village. And during the recording kind of portion of this talk, I was really struggling because I do well if I have an audience to react off of, but apparently if you just give me a camera and a set of slides, I will lose my mind. So I ended up setting a Zoom call up with some friends, including Medusa. And she just brought a lot of people, and they seemed really cool. And we talked about books and a bunch of other things, and I was like, wow, she has such cool friends. And I ended up inviting them to the IoT Village talk I was giving. And when we got there, they were like, we're so sorry. We were put in a smaller room than we expected. We don't actually have a stage or a place for people to give talks. And so we're just going to do the live stream online. And because they had a whole CTF, or sorry, I said ICS, I meant IoT. One thing about me is I don't remember acronyms. That's
Who
my
does?
unhinged opinion, is that acronyms should be banned. Heck, even with CDC, when I did get in, I texted some friends. I'm like, oh my God, I was invited to join the CDC. My friend was like, the Center for Disease Control?
That's
And,
good.
and so it was just, yeah, I ended up talking to this really cool group of people several times because I kind of did the hallway version of my talk and then we just all went out for beers. And really, I thought I was just being introduced to a very cool friend group for a long time. And at some point, at a certain point, I started to wonder, but it was also one of a like, okay, I think all of these people are CDC members. That didn't mean I thought they wanted me to join. I was just like, I get to be in the room with these cool people. And I feel like that, kind of to go back to community real quick, that is the attitude that's helped me the most, is sort of this like golden retriever energy. Because early on in my career, I got a free ticket to Tribe of Hackers, which was Marcus Carey's kind of little con to promote his book. So everybody who spoke there was somebody who was in his Tribe of Hackers book. And it ended up being really, really small. And I was like literally sitting at the table eating tacos with some absolute greats. And I'm a little bit face blind. So I just have these conversations with people without having any idea who they were and how starstruck everyone else was, because I'm like, la, 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 this is my new friend. And I think people found that really refreshing. And I still kind of keep that energy because, like, third day of DEF CON, oh, I'm not remembering who people are anymore, you know? But I think having
Yeah.
that, like, energy of I want to talk to everyone no matter where they at. Oh, awesome, this person knows more than me. I want to learn from them. Oh, awesome, this person's new to this space. Let me try to like help them get into this space more. And so yeah, I really for a while thought that I was just being introduced to these cool people and I was like, this is so cool that I get to hang out with Cult of the Dead Cow. Yeah, and then they asked me about joining and I was like, me? Really? And I think it's one of those things that I don't think I'll ever feel like I live up to the things that I have. I don't think I'll ever feel like I'm good enough. And maybe I just need to let go of that expectation and be like, well, I got to be here and this is awesome. Now, what do I get to do with this to add or, to create more good change in the world? And since I've joined, yeah, the CDC has added 2 more members, Lodri and BSI Lab, both just phenomenal hackers who are absolutely going to change the world. And getting into to be in this space with so many people that I admire and respect. And, it's really helpful for like if I have questions about career or like something technical that I'm looking at. And just to like learn from being a fly on the wall in these conversations is so cool.
Yeah. And the point about like feeling like you don't belong and what did you do to deserve? That just sounds like standard imposter syndrome. Like we all have that, right?
Someone once told me I could be the poster child for imposter syndrome, and I said, oh no, I'm not good enough to be on a poster. One thing that really helped me with my imposter syndrome is that first pen testing job I had, they had a like specific mentorship program, and they paired me with a guy who is truly one of the best hackers on the planet. Shout out Rich Merch. And, we were talking and he was talking about the work that he's done and all these things. And he was like, something that really still keeps me up at night though, like, I just feel like such an imposter in this industry. And, even though I've been doing this about 10 years, it's something I struggle with every single day. And I was like, I look up to this person so much. I know how technically skilled and like what a actual unicorn this person is. If he feels this way, then like at least I'm in good company. And I think that and kind of the like, okay, let's say that I am an imposter. Is that not also valid hacking? Like some days you just gotta like, it's like, all right, anxiety, if we're gonna be dramatic, I'm gonna be even more dramatic. Yeah, I conned my way into the Cult of the Dead Cow. Go me. that soundbite is going to haunt me later, isn't it? Uh, but I think sometimes you just have to like accept the absurdity of the claims that your brain is making a little bit. And it's something some days I can kind of laugh it off and some days I can't. I mean, when you reached out to me about this podcast, I like responded and then ghosted you for a little bit because I left my job and then I was like, "Oh, who's going to want career advice from me? I don't even have a job." And so I think like
You didn't ghost me. There was just a pause in communications. That was all.
yeah, I resurrected. And then I was just sitting there one day and I was like, this podcast is such a cool opportunity, not just because hopefully it will help me with my job search, but because of, I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I'm a huge fan. I watch a lot of your channel before every job interview,
I
and
appreciate that.
I've been watching this series. I haven't seen every single one of them, but several of them, and I'm like, this is such a cool opportunity to be on this podcast. I can't let my own like self-loathing get in the way because it's like I can either some days it's you can either do it and hate yourself or not do it and hate yourself. So you may as well just do the thing. And maybe that's not the world's best mental health advice, but I think if I stopped when I was afraid, I wouldn't have gone anywhere. And I don't want people to hear this and be like, okay, so if I'm like burning out or I'm in a bad situation, I just need to push through because, Juno just white knuckled it through some of these things. Like, you should absolutely, I think it's really important to know when to take breaks, how to recognize like burnout and some of the like, how to recognize when what's going on in your brain is really affecting what you're doing and or vice versa, and to step away. But I think, like, people have asked me, how did you have the courage to get up on stage and talk about this thing or get up and do it? And it was like, yeah, you have to just do it scared. And I think that's
Yeah.
the thing that I really learned from hosting DC214 is no matter what type of day I was having, I would have to get up and read the news or speak in front of people. And it, like, one semester, my assignments happened to be due like right before DC214 started. And so it was always like a mad scramble to get it in. I was often in a very bad mood. And it just became this like, yeah, do it upset, you do it grumpy, you do it when you're tired. And that's not to say that I could never step away and take breaks and say, hey, I need someone else to do the news today because I'm sick, having a terrible day. You should always be able to step back. But I think I found lately that I will hold myself back forever. And that's something I'm trying to stop doing in so many different areas. Like I mentioned that I'm trying to record a folk album. I've played the fiddle my entire life. That was my first love, was the bluegrass fiddle. And I used to do the fiddle competitions and stuff. I was never shy with that, but I've also always loved to sing and write songs. And it wasn't until this year that I reconnected with somebody from the Anchorage folk music scene who's here in LA, who started inviting me to like jam sessions and songwriter circles. That I'm like, yeah, I'll sing something I wrote in front of other people. Like, and it's one of those things where I'm like, all right, sorry, I'm being like, I consider it very, I don't know, self-indulgent to be like, and here I am with my guitar and a song I wrote that no one else knows. But once I did it, I was like, wait, this feels so incredible. I could have gone the rest of my life without not doing that, or without doing that, and that would have been so sad. And similarly, I love to write. I started doing the DEF CON short story contest, and that brought me back to a dream that I've had since I was small, but that I kind of gave up on. And I don't know if I'm ever going to write something crazier than like a short story for DEF CON or the T file. I think one of the things that the CDC really did see in me was my ability to write things up for T files, because the Cult of the Dead Cow isn't just about hacking and making cool technology, even though that's something awesome. But Cult of the Dead Cow started with a lot of like weird poets and artists. I mean, when Beto O'Rourke, for example, was being considered as a presidential candidate, one of the things that came up was the weird emo poetry that he wrote during his CDC days. And that's exactly where I am. And I love having T files as an outlet for some of the like deeply weird stories that are bouncing around in my brain. And, I stopped writing for a very long time because I was like, I can't make a career of this. And there's this kind of like, sometimes it's really hard to write or make music for just yourself, but the idea of putting it out there is so daunting. And I've been really fortunate that whenever I share art with people, I've had great spaces to do that that are really like receptive and accepting. And it's just brought me back to the things that I loved when I was younger. And yeah, I'm realizing that if I had gone my entire life without sharing songs and stories that I've written with people, that would have been really sad. And, that's not what's going to happen.
No, great. And just going back to something you said a few minutes ago, well, firstly, I'm a big fan of yours as well. I've followed you online for several years now.
Thank you.
So I always love the stuff that you put out. But also, just to the point on just doing stuff is I wrote a month or so ago before DEF CON about social anxiety. Like a lot of people just assume because I'm like this, I don't know, I do videos and I did live streams and I get on stage at DEF CON and do stupid freaking contests that I'm like this massive extrovert. And I'm not. I don't consider myself an extrovert at all. And I have wicked social anxiety to the point where the first DEF CON I went to, DEF CON 29, the day before I told someone, I'm not going, I can't go. And I wanted to go to DEF CON for a few years. And I just did it. The next day I was like, I'm still anxious. I still don't want to go. Not because I didn't actually want to go, but my anxiety was like, it's going to be terrible. You're going to hate it. Everything's going to be a disaster. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going anyway. And yeah, you've got to do it. And now I still have social anxiety. I'm pretty sure I was shaking at the start of Feet Feud when I did it, but you just gotta rock with it. I had so much fun. I always do. That's the thing. The anxiety is literally lying to you. It's telling you everything's going to be bad. Everything's going to be terrible. You're going to hate it. And then afterwards, it's like, yeah, I didn't. I really enjoyed that. That was great. So yeah, never listen to anxiety. It's crappy. It hates you. You just gotta push forward.
I remember seeing your post about social anxiety and I wanted to thank you for it. So I'll take this opportunity now. Thank you. Because yeah, I've definitely had similar issues in those spaces. I love DEF CON so much, but it is so overwhelming. And I think even when you're having the best time, there's a certain point where you're going to be like, I have to go sit in my room in the dark and not speak to anyone, or at least me. And I think some years I have way more anxiety than other years for absolutely no reason. And so for some reason, last year, 2024, I spent the whole time walking around oh God, I don't belong here. People think I belong and I'm just lying to them and they're going to find out, just the spiral starts. And that kind of impacted me when I was getting ready for the DEF CON this year, because I remembered how strongly I felt last year when I didn't need to. And on paper, this feels like it should be a harder year because now I'm coming in, as somebody who's not doing kind of the coolest career at DEF CON. And this was I think the first year that I wasn't signed up to do anything, though I accidentally ended up on a panel and I did Feet Feud and got to show all of DEF CON my toes.
It's not that about feet though. Let's make that clear. It's not so much about it. There were more feet this year than ever, but it's not that.
I think everybody wants the opportunity to be a menace on that stage. Because actually, your first DEF CON, I did Drunk Hacker History on the same stage. And I ended up sticking up the host, Johnny Christmas, with his super soaker full of Malort, and then getting drowned in it afterwards. That was my first attempt to try Malort, and now I'm immune to it.
I don't think anyone's immune to Malort.
So there was a point where and maybe I made that more dramatic than it needed to be, but I had drawn a card that said drown the clown. It had been right after I got Johnny Christmas with his own water gun. And so I sit on the ground, hands behind my head, execution style, and I get hit with, I don't know, a minute worth of super soakered Malort. And now it just doesn't bother me. It makes me a hero at DEF CON. I still don't love it, but I expect to be offered Malort at DEF CON, and I expect to horrify people by drinking it without flinching. But
I don't know.
Back to the feet of it all. I think people love an opportunity to be a menace on the stage, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, because that Feet Feud, I was very tired, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to volunteer. I'm going to sit and watch and have a good time, and then I might go to bed early. And then, yeah, they needed a non-binary person. I was sitting with a bunch of friends I had not bothered to come out to, not because I didn't think they were good friends or anything, but I'm lazy and I moved and I didn't want to like keep explaining myself to people. And you know how it goes sometimes. And I was like, well, I have an opportunity to do the funniest thing ever. And then as soon as I realized I had the opportunity to be a menace with a microphone, that exhaustion just went away.
Yeah.
But
Hey, it's a good place to come out as non-binary.
yeah, exactly.
The weird game show called Feet Feud on the main stage of DEF CON, which I still, to this day, cannot quite believe that we have. So there we go. It was great.
I'm so glad that event exists just because there are so many cool competitions at DEF CON, but I feel like it's awesome to see something new come in and just hit everything that DEF CON is supposed to be. Because I think in the past few years, people are like, oh, DEF CON is too corporate or not weird enough or this, that, and the other. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't be having these conversations about how to keep DEF CON strange, but I think a lot of people forget that if you want, be the weird that you wish to see in the world. Because every time I see Feet Feud, I'm like, I need to come up with a competition. This looks like so much fun. And I'm sure 20 other people in the audience feel the same way. And if at least one of us does it next year, you'll have inspired something cool. And I think, yeah, all of your competitions are a great example of like keeping the culture and community and like, yeah, being the weird that you wish to see. And that's so important. I think to anyone listening, you know, and this is something I just was watching your podcast with Kim this morning. She and I met at LineCon and DEF CON, and something that I think she had said was somebody had told her to bring a piece of yourself, and for her that was friendship bracelets or the stickers, whatever it is. Bring something cool and something you want to do, and yeah, whether that means wandering around with a bottle of Malort and offering it to people, hosting a competition, or volunteering to do something and getting up on stage for the first time. If you want DEF CON to be something, sometimes you are the best person to bring that.
Yeah, so the person who came up with that, bring a part of yourself, was Trash Puppy.
Oh, cool.
Who, ironically, is the very first episode of this podcast series, but she said it in a DEF CON. So every year I do a DEF CON top 10 tips for DEF CON newbies. Because it's a good video to like launch in like February, right? And I did that for a couple of years on my own, and then last year was Trash Puppy's first DEF CON.
Oh, cool.
So I got her to do, I was like, hey, why don't we do like 5, you can do 5 like reasons and I can do 5 reasons. And one of her reasons was, or one of her tips, sorry, for DEF CON was bring a part of yourself. I think that was such a really, really useful tip because you do see people bring stickers or even like things like little tokens, right? Like badges. Some people bring friendship bracelets. Like, it's just nice. It's just something nice because you will remember that interaction because you're getting something special. And I just think it's a really nice bonding thing. But yeah, I guess I bring stickers to DEF CON. I think I had 28 stickers this year. I need to come up with a better system for next year. But the contest is something honestly, I was a big inspiration is Lintile, obviously.
I love it.
Hacker Jeopardy was an inspiration in some ways for Feet Feud, just because it's a big stage show and it's a parody of an actual game show. But the other contest that I ran was Man Pages.
Yeah.
That was heavily inspired also by his Shmoofax game show at ShmooCon.
Oh, nice.
So it's a kind of, I went to Shmoofax and I was like, this is a really good format. I want to do something like this at DEF CON, but make it like a weird, evil twist, because his game show was actually, doable. And my game show was about software documentation. So yeah, which is always kind of evil. But yeah, so Lintile's a big inspiration to me, and also Rando, who slides it anyway. So yeah, both of them I'm very glad to share a stage with at DEF CON in terms of the contests. So yeah.
Yeah, that's something that's so cool is, yeah, we've got folks like Lintile and Rando who have been running their competitions since long before my first DEF CON. And it's great to see people building this community, because Hacker Jeopardy, my very first DEF CON, my like mentor at this internship, she was like, one of the things you have to go to is Hacker Jeopardy. she's like, you just have to watch it. You have to, it's a 10 out of 10, don't miss. And, now people are saying the same thing about Feet Feud. And I think
That's
that's,
insane to me, though.
hey, that was definitely something that I regretted missing one year. And I was like, I have to go this year. And I think that's something that's really cool is, yeah, everybody's inspiring each other. Everybody's standing on each other's shoulders. And there's really, I think a lot of people, there's really no ego of ideas, or at least the best one. It's this person's doing something cool. Now someone else is doing something similar and cool. Yay, we have more cool things. And that's the attitude we need in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, final question, and this will take us a little bit back to when we were discussing imposter syndrome. Let's solve imposter syndrome right now.
No.
Looking back on your journey so far, is there a particular achievement or project in cybersecurity that you're most proud of?
I found a very cool EDR bypass a couple of years ago, kind of completely by accident. But there's an event in Texas called O Day All Day that people come together and hang out and hack on something. And oftentimes we'll take apart IoT devices. But this one time, the host set up these really cool networks with all of these different endpoint defense systems. And the goal was to bypass them to execute something malicious. And by playing around with lol bins and then using a very weird C2, that the only reason I picked that C2 is other people were using other C2s and I didn't want to do this. I wanted to be different. And I ended up chaining a few like lol bins together to bypass a couple different EDRs that I don't think I'm supposed to name drop, but get like a full C2 shell running in environments where it really shouldn't have been. And then it was something that, like, I hate saying I did it by accident because I feel like that almost takes away from the
You stumbled on something cool, right? That's how you get over that bit.
Yeah. And I think a lot of discovery is stumbling because I've referred to pen testing as fuck around and find out as a service. I have that on stickers.
Okay, I need one of those stickers next year. You have to give me one.
Oh, I'll send you some. And so I feel like every cool thing that I've done has felt accidental. And it's like, really, it's okay. No, I was doing research and I found something. But that was just like a huge technical win that I didn't expect to have. I'm also somebody who anytime I find a cool and complex finding, I get really excited, especially like anytime I can prove out impact. I had a pen test that there was a like file upload feature on this web app, and I was able to use that to just host my own HTML and CSS. And so I hosted like my own fake malicious website on there and then built like a file stealer it was just like fancy stored XSS, but I had so much fun proving it out in all of these different ways. So I think, yeah, wins like that make me really happy. It didn't cure my imposter syndrome. I think it made it worse, but getting into the cult of the dead cow was also an amazing moment where I was like, okay, somebody sees something in me, even if I don't. And it was kind of interesting because there were a couple of things that I thought would like totally solve my imposter syndrome. Getting my first pen testing job, which did not. And then like when I got into the cult of the dead cow, I was like, maybe this is something this has got to be something that I'll be able to like hold on to as you don't feel good enough. Well, you did this. And it goes both ways sometimes. There are some days that I should not be admitting this. If I'm having a bad day, I will go to the Wikipedia page for the Cult of the Dead Cow and see Juno on the bottom because my name is in Wikipedia. And as somebody who's done a lot of Wikipedia edits over the years, I didn't even put it in there myself. And I love Wikipedia. So seeing that
I think that's fair. That's perfectly fair. That rational thing to do because, yeah, honestly, seeing your name there is awesome.
And then there are the days, though, that it's, someday people are going to realize that, like, they made a mistake. And yeah, I think, yeah, but I'm starting to hold on to like little trinkets of, I got to speak at a couple villages. The reverse engineering course that I did, I'll go reread some of the like homeworks I did on that because I think that's some of my best like technical writing. It's a good way to prepare for job interviews. And I'm like, oh yeah, I actually did all that. I got through that. And then, yeah, I have my write-ups for the EDR bypasses and then sometimes you get clients who are really insecure, and you've tested every quarter for the past 2 years, or you have one singular day. And it's, I think, in that space where we'll win, and that can get really hard. And it wasn't something I was expecting, because I think when I went into it, I was like, well, as long as I'm good, I'm going to find things. And of course, I'm going to be good. And sometimes you struggle. I think one thing that really helped was, and this kind of sounds dumb saying it, but the realization that I could take notes. I remembered my first day as an actual pen tester. I was working with someone else on a web app pen test, and I remember like logging off for the day and thinking, I don't remember the last time I've ever thought of like, how does everyone hold all this information in their brain? And the answer is they don't. They have notes. I have notes now. Running DC214 at the very beginning, I was like, I am not supposed to be here. And then I could see things, like I could see the group expanding. I went from having to beg people to speak every month to having people approach me, because I kind of took over this group, and then the pandemic happened. And it was a very big and like vibrant group of people, but keeping it alive over Discord and then coming back in 2021, it kind of, it came back much smaller. And I was like, what if I'm the one who's killed this group? And, month after month, seeing it grow back to its original size, and then even grow past that, and to where it's grown, today since I've left, that's tangible data. And I mean, you can't always use tangible data as your like go-to. That's one thing, like, I'm definitely like, that's one thing I try to stay on the side of like shit posting, because I don't want to worry too much about what people think of what I say on Twitter. Because every once in a while, people will be like, oh, like, that's so cool. You're like one of the content creators I really like. And there are a lot of people out there who create amazing content, educational content that helps people get into security. And I'm not one of them. That's just not what I do.
I disagree. You're on this podcast. You're helping me create content right now.
All right, I am a content creator.
You can be inspirational as a content creator. Like, people look up to the stuff you do, I think. So that's one thing.
Yeah, I think I see so much of the work that goes into people who stream, people who make YouTube and TikTok videos, and I want them to have their laurels. Whereas, like, I see everything that they're doing, and I feel like it's a little bit unfair for them to get compared to like somebody whose main thing is shit posting and talking about Alaskan politics. But yeah, I don't also like, I love, I have gone on podcasts and done other things, and I don't want to like put down what I'm doing either. And I will say, by saying I'm not a content creator, that's not to put down content creators. Content creators are so cool. And someday I might decide that I have more things to say on the internet. And if so,
watch this space.
Yeah. But and that's something I love, is as like, I feel like, for hackers, there's this very reasonable fear of putting your face on the internet, or like doing and saying too much online. And I think cybersecurity content creators are really building the new digital spaces in such a great way, because it almost feels like Discord is the new bulletin boards, but you have people who are kind of doing things that like old school hackers would not approve of, like showing their face and speaking with their real voice. And obviously there are people who don't too, but I think the content creation folks do a great job at making this space more welcoming. And it's not just a bunch of shadowy hackers, but it's friendly faces like yours who are just boldly and warmly welcoming everyone into cybersecurity. And I think that's an awesome way for the online community to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, we do need more content creators as well, because I think that's important to show, to show that we are, after all, normal people, even though we are technically a bunch of weirdos. Echoing back to something you said at the beginning, that's basically what I felt when I went to DEF CON the first time. Was I found my weirdos. Same feeling when I joined OnlyFeet. Like, yeah, found my weirdos there as well. So it's all about finding sets of weird people that you relate to, I think, which is always good.
That was something I hadn't expected when I first started talking to the CDC. Because like once I realized, and I it was kind of a nice thing where I didn't realize who I was talking to until a little bit. So I didn't have as much of that anxiety of, oh my God, this is who I'm talking to. But it was like, yeah, we argued about Star Wars and, we're tossing around book recommendations. And it was like, oh, these people are so cool and they're so strange. Yay. Because, yeah, you always want to find the weird people.
And DEF CON's a great place for that. It still is,
Definitely.
even though people, I know some of the old school, like it's, I don't know. Yeah, we won't open that can of worms on this podcast, but awesome. Juno, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your knowledge and experiences with all of us. Where can my listeners find and follow you online?
Yeah, I'm at Juno, Jun34u _SEC on Twitter, or at Juno on Blue Sky. I generally post the same things between accounts, but sometimes I don't. And especially if you're on Blue Sky, my alt text on photos is usually really funny. So, but yeah, those are probably the best places. If you're interested in reaching out with any questions, comments, snide remarks, my email is hack.juno@gmail.com. Yeah.
I'll put links to that in the comments. I won't put your email in the comments because I know that'll probably lead to all sorts of spam.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, the description. I meant the description. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you once again for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been really cool.